The moment I understood everything, I was standing in the kitchen holding a child's drawing. It was a Tuesday morning, ordinary in every way, the kind of morning that smells like burned toast and fresh coffee, where the light comes through the window at that low, golden angle and makes dust particles look like something sacred. Maya had already left for work. Our daughter Lily, 7 years old, was sitting at the kitchen table with her legs swinging under the chair, eating cereal in that slow, methodical way she had, always saving the colored marshmallows for last, always arranging them in a circle before eating them one by one. I was about to pour my second cup of coffee when she slid a folded piece of paper across the table toward me. "I drew our family," she said. I picked it up. Stick figures, crayon bright. A woman with yellow hair, Maya. A little girl with pigtails, Lily herself. And next to them, a tall figure with brown hair and glasses. "A man. That's Daddy," Lily said, pointing. But her finger landed on a figure I didn't recognize. A figure standing apart from the woman and the little girl. Slightly taller. Different colored hair. A separate family unit within the same drawing. "Who's the man in the glasses, sweetheart?" I asked, keeping my voice absolutely steady. She looked at me with those enormous green eyes I'd always thought she got from my mother, and said, with complete innocence, "That's my other daddy." The coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. My other daddy. 3 words. 7 syllables. And in the space between one heartbeat and the next, 6 years of my life rearranged themselves into a shape I didn't recognize. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 38 years old. I'm a structural engineer. I spend my days calculating load-bearing capacities, stress tolerances, the exact weight a thing can hold before it fails. There is a bitter irony in that now that I can barely breathe around. I've been married to Maya Mercer, born Maya Voss, for 9 years. We met at a friend's wedding in Portland, Oregon, where I grew up and where we've lived ever since. She was laughing at something her cousin said when I first saw her, and the laugh was so completely unselfconscious, so genuinely free, that I walked across the room without any plan and introduced myself. We were engaged 14 months later. People called us solid. That was always the word, solid. Daniel and Maya, solid couple, solid family, solid life. We had date nights on Fridays. We argued about whose turn it was to call the plumber. We had a rescue dog named Biscuit who slept at the foot of our bed and snored so loudly that we'd sometimes wake each other up laughing about it. We had a mortgage, a vegetable garden that never quite worked, a daughter we both adored. Lily was born 6 years into our marriage. The pregnancy was unplanned, but immediately, overwhelmingly welcomed. I was in the delivery room. I cut the cord. I held her before Maya did, because Maya was exhausted and the nurse placed Lily in my arms first, and I remember standing there in the fluorescent light of that hospital room thinking, this is the most important thing I will ever do. I meant being her father. I meant protecting her. I had no idea, in that moment, what I was already failing to see. I should go back further. Because the story, the real story, didn't begin with a child's drawing on a Tuesday morning. It began almost 8 years ago at a company retreat in Seattle that Maya attended without me. Or rather, it began with what happened at that retreat. And what happened at that retreat was something Maya carried home like a stone in her pocket, smooth from handling, completely hidden. I didn't know any of that then. I knew my wife had come back from Seattle quieter than usual. I knew she'd said the retreat was fine, boring, mostly team-building exercises and mediocre hotel food. I knew that for about 3 weeks afterward, she'd been slightly distant, slightly elsewhere, like a radio station almost but not quite tuned in. I chalked it up to work stress. She'd started a new project. Her manager was demanding. I was in the middle of a difficult contract. We were busy, and busy people drift slightly, and then they drift back. She drifted back, and I forgot about it entirely. That's the thing about red flags you don't recognize as red flags. They just become part of the landscape, part of the ordinary texture of a marriage. You file them away under normal fluctuation and you move on, because you love the person and you trust them, and your brain is not wired to suspect the person who sleeps 3 inches from your face every night. For 6 years, Lily has been my daughter in every way I understood the word. I coached her soccer team. I read to her every single night. We were working through the Chronicles of Narnia, one chapter before bed, her curled against my side smelling of shampoo and that inexplicable sweetness that little children have. I taught her to ride her bike in the driveway last summer, running alongside her with one hand on the seat until I realized I'd let go 20 feet back, and she hadn't noticed because she didn't need me anymore. That memory makes something in my chest contract painfully now. She has green eyes. I have gray eyes. Maya has blue eyes. I'd always assumed the green came from somewhere further back, my mother's side. Maybe, or some recessive combination I didn't understand. I am an engineer, not a geneticist. I trusted what I saw, and what I saw was my daughter. I still see my daughter. I need to be very clear about that. But on that Tuesday morning, standing in my kitchen with a crayon drawing in my hand, I began to understand that there were questions I had never thought to ask, and that the answers to those questions might undo everything. Lily, I said, setting my coffee down very carefully. What do you mean, your other daddy? She blinked at me. Mommy said I shouldn't talk about it. And that quiet, 7-year-old, completely guileless sentence was the moment the floor shifted under my feet. This opening section operates on the principle of expectations versus reality, perhaps the most psychologically devastating gap a person can experience. Daniel has constructed his identity around certainties. Husband, father, engineer, the man who calculates what holds and what breaks. The bitter irony of his profession is not incidental. It functions as a psychological mirror. He has spent his career understanding structural failure, and yet he could not see the cracks forming in the structure closest to him. The child's drawing is a masterclass in dramatic revelation precisely because of its innocence. Lily is not a co-conspirator. She is simply reporting her reality, the reality she has been quietly living inside, without any awareness of the devastation her words carry. This is psychologically consistent with how betrayals of this magnitude are often exposed, not through investigations or confrontations, but through the careless honesty of someone who doesn't yet know how to lie. Daniel's response, setting the coffee down carefully, keeping his voice absolutely steady, reveals a man who instinctively controls external expression while experiencing internal collapse. This is a coping mechanism, not emotional health. He compartmentalizes by reflex. The real danger is that this very trait, the engineer's habit of managing load, calculating stress, may be what delayed his awareness for years. He filed anomalies under normal fluctuation because his psychological architecture required stability. What this section ultimately establishes is that the greatest threat to Daniel wasn't Maya's secret. It was his own trained incapacity to consider that what he was measuring might already have failed. I didn't ask Lily anything else that morning. I kissed the top of her head, told her I loved her, watched her climb into the school bus with her backpack that was slightly too big for her small frame, and then I went back inside and stood in the kitchen for a long time without moving. Biscuit patted over and pressed his warm, heavy head against my leg. Dogs know things. I called in late to work. Equipment issue on site. I told my assistant something with the survey readings, and I sat at the kitchen table where Lily had been sitting, and I looked at the drawing. I looked at it for a long time. The man with glasses. The separate unit. My other daddy. I thought about the Seattle retreat. And then I thought about why I was thinking about the Seattle retreat, which was itself interesting. That my brain went there immediately, without prompting, which meant some part of me had always kept that memory indexed. Always held it slightly apart from the general archive of our marriage. Filed it not under normal fluctuation, but under something else. Something with no label. Something I'd chosen not to open. I folded the drawing very precisely along its original crease lines and put it in my jacket pocket. Over the next several days, I did something I'm not entirely proud of. I began paying attention in a way I never had before. Not the aggressive, suspicious attention of a man who's already decided what he'll find. The quiet attention of someone recalibrating, re-examining familiar data through a different lens. I started noticing things I'd registered but never processed. Maya's phone, for instance. She'd always been someone who kept her phone face down. I'd assumed this was just a habit. She found the notifications distracting. She'd mentioned that once, early in our marriage. But now I realized I couldn't actually remember a time when her phone was face up on a table when she was in the room. Only when she left the room. To shower, to get something from the car, to put Lily to bed, did her phone ever rest face up. And by then I'd always been doing something else and had never thought to look. I still didn't look. That felt like a line I wasn't ready to cross. Instead, I watched her face. I watched her the way you watch someone you're trying to understand. The way I used to watch her in the early years of our marriage, when she was still new to me and every expression was a discovery. Except now I was watching for something specific, and I wasn't sure what it was. She was, to all appearances, entirely herself. She made dinner on Wednesday, pasta with that sauce that used sun-dried tomatoes and a splash of white wine. She complained about her colleague Renata, who'd apparently hijacked a presentation again. She helped Lily with her spelling homework at the kitchen table while I cleaned up, and their voices, the patient, slightly sing-song rhythm of Maya's prompting and Lily's effortful, concentrated responses, drifted into the kitchen, and I stood at the sink listening to them and felt something I can only describe as a tearing sensation. As if two realities were pulling at me from opposite directions, and I was the material between them. I called my brother, Garrett, on Thursday. Not to tell him anything, just to hear his voice, to have an ordinary conversation about ordinary things, because ordinary things were becoming difficult to locate. Garrett is 3 years older than me and lives in Bend, about 3 hours south. He's a high school basketball coach and the kind of man who gives advice whether you ask for it or not, but whose advice is usually worth hearing. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing, his team's upcoming tournament, a pipe that had burst in his garage, whether our mother's birthday dinner should be at her house or a restaurant this year. I almost told him 3 times. Each time, something stopped me. Not pride exactly. More like the awareness that saying it out loud would make it real in a way I wasn't ready for. As long as it lived only inside me, inside the folded drawing in my jacket pocket and the recalibrating quiet of my own observation, it was still a question. Still possibly nothing. Still possibly a child's confused imagination, a phrase picked up somewhere, misapplied with the gorgeous randomness of a 7-year-old's mind. My other daddy. Kids said things. Kids invented things. Kids absorbed fragments of television and playground conversation and adult arguments heard through walls and reassembled them into statements that meant nothing or everything, or something entirely different from what they appeared to mean. I told myself this. I told myself this with the focused deliberateness of a man hammering a stake into soft ground, knowing it might not hold. The first concrete thing I noticed, the first thing that moved from the category of feeling into the category of fact, happened on Friday evening. Maya had plans. This wasn't unusual. She and her friend Diane had a standing dinner, first Friday of the month, had done for years. Diane was her college roommate. One of those friendships that had survived distance and divergence, and the general attrition that claims most relationships by your late 30s. I liked Diane. She was loud and funny and occasionally said things that were too honest and then laughed at herself for it. I trusted the friendship in the uncomplicated way you trust the long-established features of your life. Maya left at 6:30, kissed me on the cheek, smelled of that perfume she wore for going out, something warmer than her everyday scent, heavier, amber-based. I'd always liked it. At 8 o'clock, Lily asked if she could call Mommy to say goodnight. I got my phone and called Maya. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message. Lily wants to say night. Call when you can, and told Lily that Mommy was probably in a noisy restaurant and hadn't heard her phone. At 8:45, Lily was in bed and Maya still hadn't called back. I tried again. Voicemail. She came home at 10:15, slightly flushed, smelling of wine, entirely cheerful. Said Diane had been going through something with her ex-husband and they'd talked for hours. Said she'd missed the calls but her phone had been in her bag. Kissed me. Asked about Lily. All of it perfectly reasonable. All of it exactly the kind of thing that happens. I nodded and said that was fine and went to bed. And in the dark, staring at the ceiling with Maya's breathing gradually slowing beside me, I thought, Diane's last name is Marsh. Diane Marsh. And I could find her number. I didn't do it that night, but I filed it. The following week brought something else. Small, almost imperceptible, the kind of thing you'd only catch if you were specifically watching for the texture of ordinary behavior to change. Maya started going to the gym. Now, this alone meant nothing. Maya had always been someone who exercised in waves. She'd be consistent for 2 months, then let it lapse, then restart with renewed energy. Normal, healthy, unremarkable. But there were 2 things that snagged. The first, she started going in the evenings, after Lily was in bed, which was new. She'd always gone in the mornings before work when she went at all. When I mentioned this, casually, genuinely curious, not fishing, she said her morning schedule had gotten too complicated with a new project timeline. Reasonable. The second, she came home from the gym without the particular physical quality of someone who has exercised. Not every time, but some nights, she came back with hair that was slightly more carefully arranged than it should have been after a workout. Wearing the same clothes she'd left in, but something about their composition slightly different, as if they'd been removed and replaced, not simply worn through movement. I am an observational person by training. I notice when load-bearing elements shift, when a small variance in measurement indicates a larger structural issue. I began noticing the way someone notices a hairline fracture. Not dramatic, not obvious, but present. I said nothing. There was one evening in that second week when Lily did something that stopped me cold. We were watching a movie, the three of us on the couch, Lily between us in her pajamas with a bowl of popcorn balanced on her knees. Animated film, something with talking animals and bright colors. Maya had her arm around Lily's shoulders. I had my hand on Lily's knee. Lily looked up at Maya at some point and said, out of nowhere, the way children do, "Mommy, when is the thing we're not supposed to talk about going to be over?" The silence lasted approximately 1 second. It felt much longer. Maya said, smoothly, without a single bead of hesitation, "What thing, sweetheart?" "The secret," Lily said. "You've been dreaming again," Maya said, and kissed the top of her head, and reached for a handful of popcorn, and turned her attention back to the screen. And Lily, satisfied with this, or simply redirected, did the same. I kept my hand on my daughter's knee and kept my eyes on the screen and breathed with great, precise care. Maya had not looked at me. Not during Lily's question, not after her answer, not once in that entire exchange. She had managed the moment with such practiced fluency that if I hadn't been watching, if I hadn't already been holding the drawing in my mind's eye, I might have accepted it as easily as Lily had. But I was watching. And the thing about a person managing a moment is that management itself has a texture. It has the wrong kind of smoothness. The smoothness of a surface that's been deliberately leveled rather than one that was always flat. Maya knew exactly what secret Lily meant, and she'd covered it in under 3 seconds, without a single tell, in front of her husband. That was when I understood I was not dealing with a moment of weakness or a mistake that she carried guiltily. I was dealing with someone who had become practiced at this, someone for whom concealment had become fluent. The movie played on. The animals sang. Lily laughed at something and burrowed deeper between us, and I sat there between my wife and my daughter and felt the full weight of how alone I was in this room. This section is best understood through the lens of emotions and actions. Specifically, the way Daniel's internal experience of dread manifests not in confrontation, but in extraordinary restraint. Every instinct a betrayed person has is toward explosion, toward demanding answers, toward making the internal pain external. Daniel does none of this. Instead, he watches. He files. He engineers the situation the only way he knows how, by gathering data before drawing conclusions. This restraint is simultaneously his greatest strength and a symptom of something worth examining. The man who calls his brother and almost tells him 3 times, but stops. That man is protecting himself from reality just as much as he's protecting the investigation. Naming it makes it undeniable. And Daniel, who has built his life on certainty, is not yet ready to live in a world where the central certainty has failed. The gym detail is crucial not for what it proves, but for what it reveals about Maya's psychology. She has constructed a parallel life with genuine attention to plausible deniability. Each element of her cover, the gym, the dinner with Diane, the smooth redirection of Lily's innocent disclosure, functions like load-bearing architecture. It holds because each piece is individually believable. Only the pattern, viewed from the outside by someone paying careful attention, reveals the construction beneath. Lily remains the story's most powerful dramatic device precisely because she cannot lie. Children this age have not yet developed the cognitive capacity for sustained deception. When she mentions the secret and Maya fields it without a single glance at Daniel, we see the full shape of what Daniel is facing. Not a woman who made a mistake, but a woman who has been managing this secret with practiced competence, which means the secret is old, and its maintenance has required constant, deliberate effort. I called Diane on a Wednesday afternoon from my office with the door closed. I'd looked up her number through Maya's old address book, physical, leather-bound, one of those relics from before everything moved to phones, which Maya kept in the drawer of her nightstand. I'd found it while Maya was in the shower. I'd photographed the page with Diane's details. I felt like a stranger in my own bedroom. Diane answered on the second ring. She sounded exactly as I remembered, warm, slightly rushed, like someone always slightly in the middle of something else. Daniel, oh my God, it's been forever. How are you? How's that beautiful girl of yours? We talked for a few minutes. I asked about her. She was good. The situation with her ex was complicated but manageable. She'd started seeing someone new and wasn't ready to talk about it, but yes, she was happy. And then, carefully, as if I were simply filling in a gap in my own memory, I said, "Hey, did you guys have a good time last Friday?" Maya said you two talked for hours. A pause. Brief, a single second, but I was listening for it. Last Friday, Diane said. I wasn't in Portland last Friday, Daniel. I was at my sister's in Sacramento all weekend. I just got back Sunday night. There it was. Oh, right, I said. She might have mentioned you'd canceled. I probably mixed it up. You know how I am with schedules. Diane laughed. I laughed. We said we'd all get together soon. I hung up. I sat in my office chair for a long time. Outside my window, the city was doing what cities do. Traffic, pedestrians, the ordinary business of ordinary lives, completely indifferent to the fact that mine had just fundamentally reorganized itself. Maya had not been with Diane on Friday, which meant she had been somewhere else, with someone she couldn't name, someone she'd covered with a trusted, familiar, innocent name. I thought she chose Diane because Diane is someone I've never had a reason to doubt, someone whose name, in our marriage, functions as a shorthand for safety. I thought, she's done this before. I want to be honest about what happened to me internally in the days that followed, because the internal experience of this kind of discovery is not what people imagine it to be. There's no clarity. That's the thing no one tells you. People assume it must be a revelation, that the moment you know, and the knowing is galvanizing and terrible and somehow clean. It isn't. What it actually is a long, grinding, nauseating process of holding two realities simultaneously. The reality in which you are still husband and father, and the coffee is still warm, and your daughter still needs to be taken to soccer practice on Saturday. And the reality in which everything is already over, has perhaps been over for years, and you are simply the last person to understand it. I functioned. I went to work. I came home. I had dinner with my family. I listened to Maya talk about her colleagues, about Lily's school, about a documentary she wanted to watch, and I responded at appropriate intervals with the correct facial expressions. And somewhere underneath all of that, I was standing at the edge of something vast and dark and trying very hard not to look directly at it. Sleep became difficult. I'd lie in the dark next to Maya, close enough to feel the warmth coming off her, to hear her breathing, to smell the familiar specific scent of her that I had loved for 9 years. And I'd run calculations. Not engineering calculations. The other kind. The kind where you count backward from a date. Where you try to locate the precise moment when something shifted. Where you do arithmetic you don't want to do. Lily was 7, which meant she was conceived 8 years ago, give or take. Which meant 8 years ago something happened that I was unaware of. 8 years ago was the Seattle retreat. I was doing math I didn't want to finish. The next thing I found was not something I was looking for. I was clearing the junk drawer in the kitchen, one of those periodic domestic reorganizations that happens for no particular reason, just the ordinary chaos of household administration, and I found, beneath a tangle of rubber bands and expired coupons and a broken thermometer, a receipt. A hotel receipt. From a place called the Alderton House, which I knew, a mid-range boutique hotel in the Pearl District, the kind of place that was nice enough to feel special, but not so nice as to attract attention. The receipt was dated 14 months ago. One night. 2 guests. The name on the receipt was not Maya's name. The name on the receipt was a woman's name I didn't recognize, Lauren Forsyth. I turned the receipt over. Nothing on the back. Just the standard breakdown. Room rate, taxes, the minibar charge for 2 bottles of water and a bag of almonds. 2 bottles of water. 2 people. I photographed it and put it back exactly where I'd found it. Lauren Forsyth. I turned the name over in my mind the way you turn something over in your hands when you're trying to understand its weight. I didn't know anyone by that name. Maya had never mentioned anyone by that name. The receipt was 14 months old. That evening I searched the name online. LinkedIn turned up a Lauren Forsyth who worked in pharmaceutical sales, based in Portland, 41 years old. Her profile photo showed a pleasant, professionally dressed woman with shoulder-length dark hair. Nothing I recognized. Nothing that connected her to Maya. But she'd been in a hotel room with someone, and the receipt had been in my kitchen drawer for over a year. Either Maya had put it there, which made no sense if it were incriminating, or Maya hadn't known it was there, had maybe slipped it into a pocket and forgotten, had found it later and put it in the junk drawer rather than throwing it away, which also made no sense, unless throwing it away felt like an action that required decision and the drawer was easier. People were irrational about things that scared them. They put them somewhere and didn't look at them. The drawer was full of other things she hadn't dealt with. I needed more. I want to tell you about a conversation I had with my neighbor, Frank Oduya, around this time. Frank is 62, a retired architect, widower, and the kind of man who spends Saturday mornings in his garden and waves to everyone who passes and knows more about the neighborhood than anyone gives him credit for. I was bringing in the garbage cans from the street on a Thursday evening when Frank appeared beside me in that unhurried way he had, as if he'd simply materialized out of the ambient air of the street. "Evening, Daniel," he said. "Hey, Frank." We talked about nothing for a few minutes. The weather, a pothole on our street that had been reported 3 times with no action. And then Frank said, in that same unhurried tone, "I don't know if this is any of my business." Something in my chest tightened. "Go ahead. I've seen a car," he said. "Parked across the street a few times, past couple of months. Different times, sometimes evenings, sometimes a Saturday morning. Man inside, just sitting. I don't like to assume things, and maybe it's nothing. But I know your car, and it isn't yours. And I notice things." "What kind of car?" "Dark blue Volvo. Newer model. Can't tell you the plates, I'm sorry. I'm not one to write things down." He paused. "Might be nothing, but I wanted you to know." I thanked him. He nodded once, in the manner of a man who'd discharged a responsibility and returned to his garden. I stood on the sidewalk in the dusk and thought, someone has been watching my house. And then I thought something that didn't connect, and then connected with a cold, slow click, or someone has been watching for something, waiting to see when it's safe. That night, I lay awake running through permutations. The man in the car could be anyone. Could be unrelated, a real estate canvasser, someone visiting a neighbor, someone who liked to sit in his car and think. Frank might be pattern matching from concern rather than observation. But Frank was an architect. He noticed structural things. He noticed when something didn't belong. I thought about the hotel receipt. Lauren Forsyth, a name used instead of Maya's name. A false name, or another person's name. I couldn't know which yet. I thought about the gym evenings, the hair that was too composed. I thought about the Friday with Diane who was in Sacramento. I thought about Lily's drawing and the man with glasses and my other daddy, spoken with the uncomplicated certainty of a child reporting observable fact. And I thought, whatever this is, it is not simple. It has layers. It has been maintained for a long time by someone with the discipline and intelligence to maintain it. And somewhere inside those layers is a truth that is going to change everything. I did not sleep. The structure emerging here is one of stages and points of no return. And the confirmed lie about Diane represents the first genuine point of no return in Daniel's investigation, if not yet in the relationship itself. Before this call, Daniel was operating in the ambiguous space between suspicion and possibility. Afterward, he is operating in the space of certainty, certain that a lie was told, certain it was premeditated, certain that it is part of a pattern. The ground has shifted permanently. What's psychologically fascinating is how Daniel handles this certainty. He does not confront. He does not accelerate. He becomes more methodical, which is itself a form of psychological defense. The investigation is the container into which he pours the unbearable emotional energy of betrayal. By converting grief into procedure, he maintains function. He can sit across the dinner table from Maya and respond at the correct intervals because some part of his brain has filed the grief under later and elevated the investigation to primary status. The hotel receipt introduces a genuinely destabilizing element, the name Lauren Forsyth. This is the story's first major red herring, and it functions beautifully because it forces Daniel and the audience into a new uncertainty. Is this Maya's alias? Another person entirely? A mutual friend? The drawer becomes a psychological metaphor. Maya, like Daniel, may have been unable to destroy evidence she didn't know how to face. Frank's observation about the car adds an external witness to the architecture of concealment, and it introduces a crucial question. Is someone else entangled in this beyond Maya and an unnamed man? The world of the secret, it seems, is larger than Daniel imagined. And the larger it is, the longer it has been in existence. And the more people have known while Daniel remained in the dark. I hired a private investigator on a Monday morning. I want to be honest about how that felt, because it felt terrible. It felt like a betrayal in itself, like by taking this step, I was the one doing something wrong. I was the one introducing surveillance and suspicion into a marriage that was supposed to be built on trust. There was a part of me, still, that wanted to find nothing, that wanted the investigator to come back and tell me I was paranoid, that my wife went to the gym and had dinner with friends, and the man in the drawing was a teacher or a television character, that I had assembled a conspiracy out of the ordinary friction of a long marriage. I wanted that very badly. I want to be clear about that. The investigator's name was Patricia Shields. She was recommended by a colleague, not a close friend, an acquaintance from a professional network, someone I trusted to be discreet. Patricia was in her 50s, compact, efficient, with the manner of someone who had heard every variation of this particular story and had arrived at a compassionate but unsentimental professionalism about it. She did not make me feel judged. She asked clear questions and took clear notes. I told her what I knew. The Friday with Diane who wasn't there. The gym evenings with the wrong aftermath. The hotel receipt with the name Lauren Forsythe. The drawing. The man in the Volvo that Frank had described. Patricia listened to all of it without expression and said, "Give me 2 weeks." In those 2 weeks, I lived an almost perfect performance of my normal life. I took Lily to soccer on Saturday and stood on the sideline in the cold morning air, watching her chase the ball with that determined, slightly uncoordinated intensity that 7-year-olds have, and I clapped when she got near the goal, and she looked for me in the crowd and found me immediately, as she always did, and grinned. I grinned back. The grin cost me nothing. The love behind it cost me nothing. Whatever else was true, that was true. Maya stood beside me on the sideline. We shared a thermos of coffee. She pointed at something funny Lily did and laughed, and I laughed too. And for a moment, a genuine, unperformed moment, I forgot. I forgot everything except the cold air and the bad coffee and my daughter's pink cleats and my wife's laugh. And then I remembered, and the forgetting made the remembering worse. Patricia's first update came 9 days in. She called me on my cell during lunch, and I took the call in my car in the parking garage, engine off, the concrete around me amplifying the silence. She'd identified the man. His name was Callum, 43 years old, originally from Edinburgh, now based in Portland, where he worked as a senior architect at a mid-sized firm in the South Park blocks. He was divorced, had been for 4 years. He had a daughter of his own, 12 years old, who lived primarily with her mother in Lake Oswego. He wore glasses. He and your wife have had contact going back approximately 7 years, Patricia said. I want to be careful with what I'm telling you before I have full documentation, but the pattern is consistent and established. He appears to be connected to the hotel receipt. The name Lauren Forsythe is a friend of his. I'm still working on how that name ended up on the reservation. 7 years, I said. At minimum. That's as far back as I can verify with current resources. 7 years. Lily was 7. The math I hadn't wanted to finish finished itself. There's something else, Patricia said. The car your neighbor described, the Volvo. I don't believe it's Callum Reed's vehicle. His car is a gray Audi. The Volvo registration comes back to a woman named Christine Beaumont. She's a family law attorney. I absorbed that. Maya hired a family law attorney. I can't confirm that. The car may be coincidental, but it's worth noting. After I hung up, I sat in the parking garage for a long time. The engine ticked as it cooled. Somewhere above me, a car door slammed and footsteps echoed and faded. Maya might already be talking to a divorce attorney. While I was standing on the soccer sideline sharing coffee from a thermos, she might already be several moves ahead of me in a game I hadn't known I was playing. The red herring about Lauren Forsythe resolved itself 3 days later. Patricia called again. Lauren Forsythe, it turned out, was Callum Reed's ex-girlfriend. They'd dated for about a year before his divorce was finalized. They'd remained friendly. At some point, apparently, she'd helped facilitate a hotel booking using her name and corporate account. Whether she knew the full context of what she was facilitating, Patricia couldn't determine. She'd been, it seemed, a useful tool in a system designed to obscure. A whole woman, a real person with a LinkedIn profile and a career in pharmaceutical sales, reduced to a cover name in my kitchen drawer. I found this detail almost unbearably sad, though I couldn't have explained why. There was a moment in the second week that cracked something open in me in a way the investigation itself hadn't quite managed. I was helping Lily with a school project, a family history timeline, the kind of thing teachers assign that seems simple and turns out to be a small excavation. She had to interview a family member and write down things she'd learned. She chose me. She had a worksheet with printed questions. She sat across the kitchen table from me with a pencil and her tongue slightly out in concentration, the way she always looked when she was being serious. "What's your favorite memory?" she read carefully. I thought about it for a moment. "The day you were born," I said, "standing in the hospital holding you for the first time." She wrote this down with great deliberateness, sounding it out under her breath. "What do you love most about our family?" "That we're all together," I said. And then, because I couldn't help it, because I needed to know while I still could ask without it meaning too much, "What do you love most about our family, Lil?" She didn't hesitate. "That you always come to my soccer games," she said. "And that we read every night. And that Daddy," she stopped, looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, an awareness that she'd said something she needed to navigate. "My daddy here," she amended, carefully, "makes really good pancakes. My daddy here." She'd already, at 7 years old, developed a language for this. A syntax for a reality she'd been living inside, without anyone explaining it to her. She'd built her own vocabulary for it out of necessity, out of the beautiful adaptive intelligence of children who understand more than adults know. "My daddy here." I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. "I love you, Lil," I said. "I know," she said, with complete, uncomplicated certainty, and returned to her worksheet. That certainty, the way she said "I know" with no performance, no hesitation, no caveat, that was the thing that finally made me cry. Not in front of her. Later, in the car, in the dark, with the windows up. Patricia delivered her final report on a Thursday. I met her at a coffee shop in Northeast Portland, far from our neighborhood. She had a folder. She set it on the table between us. "I want to prepare you," she said. "I know," I said. The documentation was comprehensive. Photographs, time-stamped. Callum, Reed, and Maya, entering and leaving a restaurant I'd never been taken to in the Alphabet District. A hotel in Beaverton, different from the Alderton House, a different system of cover. Phone records, obtained through legal channels, showing contact between their numbers going back to the period shortly after the Seattle retreat. Not the retreat itself. The contact began 3 weeks after, which told its own story about what had happened in Seattle and what had grown from it in the weeks that followed. And then, at the back of the folder, something Patricia flagged specifically. "This is the part one want you to sit with before you decide anything," she said. It was documentation of a different kind. Not photographs. Records. Legal records, obtained through a source Patricia declined to specify, relating to a filing made 6 months ago. Maya had consulted Christine Beaumont, the family law attorney in the Volvo, 6 months ago. She had not yet filed anything, but she had begun the consultation. She had documents prepared, documents that included a proposed custody arrangement. The proposed custody arrangement included provisions for a third party, not identified by name in the documents Patricia had, to be formally introduced into Lily's life in a parental capacity. Callum Reed, the man with glasses. My other daddy. Maya was not simply having an affair. Maya had, at some level, been building toward a restructuring of our entire family. She had a plan. She had a lawyer. She had a timeline. And I had been standing in the kitchen making pancakes. This section demands a cause and effect analysis, because the architecture of concealment that Maya has built is itself a chain of causes generating increasingly far-reaching effects. Each practical decision, using Lauren Forsyth's name, switching hotels, timing the gym evenings to avoid pattern recognition, generated a false sense of security that allowed the next decision to be made with greater boldness. This is the psychology of sustained deception. Each successful cover increases the deceiver's confidence and scope. But the cause and effect chain that matters most here is the one Daniel has not yet fully processed, the one that began 7 years ago in Seattle and generated a child. Whether Lily is biologically Callum Reed's daughter or not, Maya made a decision at some point to structure their relationship, and eventually Lily's life, around that possibility. The custody documents are the most devastating revelation not because they confirm the affair, but because they reveal premeditation at the deepest possible level. An affair is an act of passion or need or weakness. A custody arrangement is a plan. Lily's interview, "My Daddy Here," provides the emotional counterweight that keeps this section from becoming purely procedural. She has, in her 7-year-old wisdom, already sorted her world into categories. She loves Daniel not from obligation or confusion, but from genuine specific attachment. The pancakes, the soccer games, the nightly reading. These are the things she has named as love. Whatever her biological reality, her relational reality is unambiguous. She knows who shows up. This is the moral center of the story, and it complicates everything that follows. Because whatever Daniel decides to do about Maya, whatever legal or emotional consequences unfold, Lily's I know, her certainty of being loved, is the thing that must be protected above all other considerations. I waited 4 more days before I said anything to Maya. 4 days in which I did everything correctly. Came home on time, made dinner twice, read to Lily, took Biscuit on his evening walk, watched a show with Maya on the couch with her feet in my lap the way she always arranged herself, and felt absolutely nothing except a cold, clear, extraordinary calm. This is shock, I understand now. Not the dramatic, cinematic shock of movies. The functional kind. The kind that wraps around you like insulation and allows you to operate at full external capacity while everything interior has gone very still and very quiet, like the moment between lightning and thunder. I used the 4 days to think, to be precise about what I wanted to say, to talk to a lawyer of my own, a man named Robert Shun, recommended by a friend, who was blunt and efficient and told me clearly what my rights were, what the documentation meant, what the custody implications could look like given what Patricia had found. I used the 4 days to take care of myself in the small, specific ways that would matter later. I called Garrett, and this time I told him, not everything, not yet, but enough. His response was silence for a long moment. And then, tell me what you need. That was all. That was enough. And I used the 4 days to grieve, in the privacy of my car and my office with the door closed, and the 45 minutes I spent one morning sitting in the parking lot of Lily's school after drop-off, watching the bus pull away, watching the ordinary parenthood of other people continuing all around me, and understanding that the version of my life I had believed in was gone. Whatever came next would be real, but it would be a different shape. On the 5th day, a Sunday evening, I put Lily to bed early, read 2 chapters of The Silver Chair, waited until her breathing slowed and she was deeply asleep, came downstairs, sat across from Maya at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I didn't intend to drink. She looked up from her laptop, smiled briefly. "She go down okay?" "Yes," I said. "Maya, I need to talk to you about something." Something moved across her face, so fast I almost missed it. Not guilt exactly, more like recognition, the particular recognition of someone who has been waiting for a specific thing and has just seen it arrive. She closed her laptop. "Okay," she said. "I know about Callum Reed," I said. The name landed in the room with its full weight. She held it for a moment without any expression at all, not denial, not collapse, not performance, just stillness. "How long?" she asked. "Long enough." She nodded slowly, looked down at the table. Her hands were folded in front of her on the surface, and they stayed perfectly still, which told me she was working to keep them still. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," I said, "starting with Seattle." She told me. I will not reproduce every word of that conversation, because some of it belongs only to the 2 of us and to the specific wreckage of that evening. But I'll tell you the shape of it, because the shape matters. She met Callum Reed at the Seattle retreat. He was presenting to her company as a consultant. His firm had done some work with hers. They'd talked for hours that first evening, then the second. She'd gone back to her room fully intending nothing. And then at some point, she couldn't locate the exact moment, she said, and I believed her, which was its own strange thing. Intention became irrelevant. She came home. She told herself it was nothing, a conference aberration, the kind of thing that happened and then stopped. She maintained this for 3 weeks. And then she called him. "I tried to end it," she said. "Twice," she said. Once when she realized she was pregnant. Once when Lily was about 2 years old, and she'd looked at me playing with our daughter on the kitchen floor, and understood what she was doing to us and had told Callum it was over. He hadn't accepted that the first time. The second time, she said, she'd been the one who hadn't accepted it. Do you love him? I asked. She looked at me directly for the first time in the conversation. Her eyes were dry. Mine were too. We were past crying, both of us, into something beyond it. Yes, she said. I'm sorry. I know that's the worst thing I can say, but I can't answer you honestly without saying yes. Is Lily his? The silence was 3 seconds. Perhaps 4. I don't know, she said, which was, in its own way, the most devastating answer she could have given, because it meant she'd always known it was possible. For 7 years, she had held that possibility inside her and said nothing. Had watched me hold our daughter in the delivery room and cut the cord and stand there in the fluorescent light thinking this was the most important thing I'd ever do, and said nothing. I want a paternity test, I said. I know, she said. I've known you'd need that. You've been talking to a lawyer. If this surprised her, she didn't show it. Yes. For 6 months. Yes. A pause. I was trying to figure out how to protect Lily. Whatever happened with us, I needed to know Lily would be okay. And did it occur to you, I said, very quietly, that she would have been significantly more okay if you'd told me the truth 7 years ago? Maya looked down at her hands. Yes, she said. Every day. There was a moment near the end of that conversation when she said something I've thought about many times since. I kept waiting, she said, for the right time. And then there was no right time. And then there was too much time. And then she stopped. Looked at the wall behind me, at nothing. It became easier to keep going than to stop. The lie had its own momentum, I said. Yes. So did our marriage. She looked back at me then, and something in her expression shifted. Something softer, something genuinely sad in a way that wasn't about managing the situation. I know, she said. Daniel, I'm sorry. I know those words don't hold what I mean. No, I agreed. They don't. Biscuit padded into the kitchen then, looked at us both, and settled under the table between our feet. Neither of us moved. What happens now? Maya asked. I don't know yet, I said. Tonight, I need you to sleep in the guest room. She nodded, stood, looked at me one more time with that expression I couldn't fully name. Something between grief and relief, as if the ending of concealment, even in this excruciating form, contained something that felt like oxygen. She went upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The house was very quiet. Above me, I could hear Lily's small sounds of sleep, the particular rhythm that I knew as well as my own breath. Whatever else this night was, she was still up there. She was still mine, in the way that mattered most. This confrontation scene demands a psychological analysis, because what makes it extraordinary is what is absent from it: performance. There is no screaming, no shattering of objects, no theatrical collapse on either side. This is the psychological reality of confrontations between two intelligent adults who have, in their different ways, been preparing for this moment. Daniel consciously over 4 days, Maya unconsciously for 7 years. Maya's immediate acceptance of the confrontation, her okay, her lack of denial, reveals a psyche that is exhausted from maintenance. The sustained effort of keeping a parallel life viable for 7 years has cost her something profound. Her relief at the end, the sense of oxygen that Daniel perceives in her expression, is psychologically authentic. The moment of exposure, however devastating, is also the moment the load is finally set down. This is not innocence. It is not justification, but it is human. Her admission that she loves Callum Reed is the moment of greatest honesty in the entire story, and Daniel's response to it. The dry eyes, the stillness, the acknowledgement that it is the worst answer and also the only honest one, reveals how far he has traveled in 4 days. He has moved through rage, privately, in cars and parking lots, into something that might be called radical clarity. He is not beyond pain. He is past the place where pain generates chaos. The detail of Biscuit settling under the table between them is the story's most quietly perfect image. The dog, who knows things, who pressed his head against Daniel's leg on the morning everything began. He positions himself between them, not with either, not leaving. It is, perhaps, the most accurate representation of what is happening to this family. The love between all its members is real, and it will not save what it cannot save, and it will not disappear when everything else does. The paternity test results came back on a Friday, 6 weeks after the confrontation. I had taken Lily to her pediatrician for what I described to Maya as a routine checkup. There was a form of cruelty in the normalcy of the setting, the cheerful dinosaur wallpaper, the nurse who knew Lily by name and gave her a sticker. The sample was collected simply and without drama. Lily thought it was a game. She blew into a tube and earned a sticker and asked if we could get hot chocolate on the way home. And I said yes and meant it and thought of absolutely nothing else for 45 minutes. The results arrived by email. I was at my office. I read them alone, the way I had wanted to. Callum Reed was not Lily's biological father. I read the line 3 times. I sat with it. I let it mean what it meant. I am Lily's father. I was always Lily's father, in the way that had always mattered, in the way she'd confirmed at the kitchen table with her worksheet and her pencil. But now I was also her father in the narrower biological sense. The math I'd been doing in the dark for weeks resolved into something I hadn't let myself hope for. I called Garrett first. He said, "Good. Just that. Good." The word was exactly the right size. I want to be precise about what happened next, because people have a tendency to want betrayal stories to resolve into either reconciliation or clean severance, and the reality is rarely so tidy. Maya and I did not reconcile. I want to be clear about that. What she had done, not the affair alone, but the 7 years of sustained concealment, the custody consultations conducted in secret while we shared a bed and a dinner table and a daughter, was not something I could move past, not in the way a marriage requires. There are different kinds of broken. Some things break cleanly and the pieces can be reassembled. Some things shatter in a way that scatters the fragments too widely. What we did was this. We told Lily, together, in the way that a child psychologist advised us to. We sat with her in her room with the drawings on the wall, the collection of tiny plastic animals arranged on the windowsill, the Narnia books on the shelf, and we told her that we were going to live in 2 different houses, and that this had nothing to do with anything she had done, and that we would both always be her parents. We used the words a professional had given us, and they were good words, the right words, and Lily cried, and we held her between us, and that was the most important thing I've ever done. Not cutting the cord, though I thought it was. Sitting in that room, holding my daughter while her world reorganized itself, making sure she felt the presence of both her parents on either side of her. She asked, at some point, with the direct simplicity of a child who doesn't yet know how not to ask, "Is it because of the secret?" Maya and I looked at each other over the top of her head. "Yes, sweetheart," Maya said. "But the secret is gone now. There are no more secrets." I don't know if Maya was being truthful in that moment. I think she was trying to be, which is not the same thing. But for Lily's sake, and for the sake of the room we were all 3 sitting in, I chose to let it be enough. We sold the house 8 months after the confrontation. Maya moved into an apartment in the Hawthorne neighborhood, pleasant, walkable, closer to Lily's school. I rented a house in the same school district, which was the central logistical priority, and which is a 2-bedroom, so Lily has her own room when she's with me. I bought her a new bedside lamp. She chose it herself, shaped like a moon, and we've started The Magician's Nephew from the beginning of the Chronicles because she decided she wanted to read the whole series in publication order. We read every night when she's with me. The moon lamp throws a warm light on the ceiling. Biscuit lives with me. He made his preference clear by simply refusing to enter Maya's car on moving day, and we all agreed this was his decision to make. I have thought a great deal in the months since about what I should have seen and when. About the red flags I filed under normal fluctuation and moved past. About whether earlier confrontation would have changed anything. Whether the truth at 2 years, or at 4, or at 6, would have meant something different for all of us, particularly for Lily. I've arrived at something that isn't quite forgiveness and isn't quite understanding, but might be in the vicinity of both. Maya is not a monster. She is a person who made a decision and then spent years trying to protect everyone, including herself, and including a love she didn't know how to give up, and the methods she chose to do that inflicted harm she may not have fully calculated. The harm was real. I don't minimize it. But I am also a person who, by his own honest assessment, was sometimes easier to fool than he should have been, because trusting felt like love and questioning felt like betrayal, and I had confused those 2 things for longer than I want to admit. I am working on separating them. I saw Callum Reed once, at a distance, on a Saturday when he was picking Lily up from a birthday party she'd attended. I don't know if Maya asked him to do it or if it was a practical arrangement. He was standing on the sidewalk in front of another family's house, and he was wearing glasses, and he was looking at his phone, and he looked like a completely ordinary person, which is, of course, what most people are. I drove past without stopping. I don't know what I would have said. I still don't. What I do know is this. Lily came home that evening smelling of birthday cake and telling me in elaborate detail about the games they'd played, and she climbed onto the couch beside me and fit herself under my arm with the particular precision of a child who knows exactly where she fits, and Biscuit jumped up and settled across both our laps, and she said, "Read?" And I reached for the book, and none of the rest of it, none of it, was in that room. There is a drawing on my refrigerator now. Lily made it last month. A woman with yellow hair. A little girl with pigtails. A man with gray eyes. A dog. One family unit. The man is standing with the little girl and the dog. She didn't explain it. She just handed it to me and went back to her coloring, and I put it on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like the Oregon coast, and I have looked at it every morning since. I don't know what the coming years hold. I don't know what Lily will understand when she's older, what questions she'll have, what my answers will be worth. I don't know if I'll find my way back to the kind of trust that lets you sleep easily next to another person. I don't know if what I've built, the smaller, realer life I'm living now, will feel like enough, or will feel like loss, or will feel like both depending on the day. What I know is that I am her father. I know it in the engineering sense, structurally, verifiably, load-bearing. And I know it in the only sense that has ever actually mattered, which is that when she looks for me in the crowd at soccer, she finds me. Every time. I will keep showing up until she stops needing me to. And I suspect she won't stop for a very long time. Studies on parental attachment consistently show that the quality and consistency of a parent's presence, not biological connection alone, is the primary determinant of a child's sense of security and emotional development. A child who knows she is seen, reliably, unconditionally, by at least one stable adult has the foundational resource for everything else. Daniel Mercer knew this, structurally, before he knew it in any other way. He had always shown up. The resolution offers a framework of emotional needs. And what makes it so psychologically rich is that every character in this story was operating, at some level, from unmet emotional needs whose mismanagement created cascading harm. Maya wants something beyond the solid, reliable structure of her marriage. Not because Daniel was insufficient, but because human desire is not always rational or proportional to what one has. The 7-year concealment was not cruelty for its own sake. It was the contortion of a person trying to hold incompatible needs simultaneously without destroying anyone. She failed, but the failure was not the desire. It was the method. Daniel needed to believe in the stability he'd built, needed it enough that his observational intelligence, real and acute, was, for years, in service of not seeing rather than seeing. His brain filed anomalies not because he was foolish, but because the cost of the alternative was too high. This is not weakness. It is the entirely human preference for a world that makes sense over one that doesn't. Lily needed what all children need, to be held, reliably, by people who love her. The story's profound emotional grace note is that she always had that, from Daniel specifically. The drawing on the refrigerator, the moon lamp, the nightly reading, the certainty of being found in the crowd. These are not consolation prizes. They are the substance of what a parent is. The final image, Lily fitting herself under Daniel's arm with the precision of someone who knows exactly where she belongs, is the story's definitive statement. Betrayal took many things: the house, the marriage, the version of reality Daniel had lived inside. It did not take this. Some structures hold even when everything around them fails. Some things, properly built, bear the weight. This story operates as a meditation on the architecture of trust, how it is built, how it is maintained by chosen ignorance, and what its ruins can and cannot sustain. The central psychological theme is not infidelity but perception, the extraordinary human capacity to see and not see simultaneously, to hold evidence in peripheral vision and decline to bring it into focus, because focus changes everything. Daniel is not a passive victim. He is a man whose psychological architecture, built around stability, certainty, and the engineering conviction that careful observation prevents catastrophic failure became, paradoxically, the very thing that made him vulnerable. He was watching all along. He simply wasn't watching for this. The tragedy is not that he missed the signs. It is that his love, his trust, his professional habit of assuming structural soundness until proven otherwise, all the things that made him a good husband and father, were also the things that kept him from asking the questions that would have changed everything sooner. Maya's portrait is the story's most complex ethical space. She is neither villain nor sympathetic victim. She is a person who chose, repeatedly, over 7 years, to protect a secret rather than a marriage, and who built a system of concealment sophisticated enough to require a professional investigator to dismantle. The custody documents represent the story's most morally ambiguous element. Was she protecting Lily or planning a future she'd already decided on? The answer is probably both, which is the kind of moral complexity that resists easy judgment. Lily, ultimately, is the story's moral center. She is also its most honest narrator, the one who cannot lie, who named the secret before anyone else did, who sorted her world into my daddy here with the adaptive clarity of a child building vocabulary for a reality she hadn't been given words for. Her final drawing, one family unit, the man and the girl and the dog, is not a statement about biology or legal arrangement. It is a statement about presence, about showing up, about the specific, irreplaceable weight of being found in the crowd. The universal lesson this story offers is not about infidelity, though infidelity is its engine. It is about the stories we tell ourselves to maintain the worlds we need to live in, and the extraordinary, painful grace of the moment when the story finally ends and the real world, in all its altered and frightening shape, becomes the only one available. That moment is not an ending. It is, always, a beginning.